Welcome back to the Training Model Podcast. From your end, this will be looking the exact same, but from my end, we have some huge upgrades, and I might completely fuck this up, but I am using OBS for recordings now. As I've been discussing over the last few weeks, doing some tech upgrades, trying to elevate my tech experience in the training model studio here, which is really just an office, but I've learned how to use OBS. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you will be seeing the OBS screen. And what I've learned is I can flick to cam only. I've built a couple of scenes. I think I have the audio correct. I'm hoping that the quality is slightly better than what I was previously doing just with Loom. But my goal with these tech upgrades, obviously I want just the quality of my content to be a little better, but another thing that I want to start to offer is like, I don't know if you ever watch, so somebody that does it is James Smith PT. He does like roasting of social media content, social media strategies. People like send him their websites and send him their Instagrams and stuff, and then he just like rips through them and like picks apart little things. See, right now you're on my fucking desktop. Yeah, this is I need to learn this stuff. If you're listening to this, this is a real visual experience podcast here at Training Model. We're against that audio only. The good thing is most of my podcast plays, I'm probably averaging about 160 plays total on these episodes. Most of them, when I say most, just over half of them are going to be on YouTube. So most people are going for the visual experience anyway, but yeah, it might take me a few episodes to get this thing correct, but this is the first crack. We'll see how we go. But I watched James Smith PT, his business. So James Smith, his business content and all the free stuff that he does, and it's fantastic. It's helped me a lot with just little things and just subtle adjustments to the way I frame things, and especially my website. Definitely far from perfect, but it's definitely better than it was. And he does these things where he roasts social media content from people that follow him and subscribe, and they give him the data, the URLs and stuff, and he just goes through and rips them apart and offers advice. And I want to do the same thing with lifting. So part of this is for me to learn how to do that, and then learn how to actually, I don't even know how to best set it up. Ultimately, I want it to long-term be in the Discord, that as the Discord grows and as my movement foundations, my level 1, training model level 1 movement course starts to get people engaged, and hopefully they join the Discord and they run through the Discord. That I think is where most of it will happen. People will hopefully send lifts in there, and I can review and do technique reviews just through the Discord, and I can just use OBS to screen the page better and do all of those sort of things. But the other part to that is I want to be able to do it publicly as well, so people can send me their videos. I don't know how to best set it up though. Obviously, if I'm just scrolling through an Instagram page, that's one way to do it, but not everybody posts their all their lifting in there, and more often than not, I want to see the random things. I just don't want to see your heaviest lifts. I want to see like what's your strategy on a pull down? What's your strategy with a push up? What's your strategy with a whole bunch of different, like your accessories more than anything is where most of the benefits of these sort of things are going to stem from. So I don't know exactly how to do it. I'm thinking potentially like setting up a Google Drive that anyone can just dump videos in, and then I just roll through. And as I do them, I delete them or something like that. That was one way I was thinking about. The other way is somehow through my website, people being able to upload images and videos in there. But I want it to be easy. I do think the Discord is the best way to do it. I just won't have the Discord set up. In fact, I'll probably hopefully have it set up before the 29th of March. So before the end of March, hopefully I'll have the Discord set up, because I think the one playground group that I'm running, the private workshop, the private course, really, it's a course, it's a full course with the one playground team. which kicks off. They get pre-learning from Monday, the 9th. There's 3 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks of pre-learning. There's the first workshop, and then there's 4 weeks of live materials and course similar to my movement mentorship, but slightly stripped back a little bit more, not entry level, but just a little bit more broad sweeping ideas and applications rather than some of the very specific things that we discuss in the movement mentorship. It was designed that way specifically. I want them to be running through the Discord as my trial group, because I can control it so much easier. It would just be the one playground group for the first 4 weeks. But then obviously once it expands and my foundations movement course, which is something I want to have set up by middle of April, ready for download, ready for consumption and engagement with. And then obviously kicking off to intake 6 of the movement mentorship in May. I want to have the whole system running for that. That is the most important part for me. But these little tech upgrades are just moving in that direction. So potentially Discord is the best way to do it. The only thing is, the only way to get into the Discord, you have to buy the Movement Foundations course. Maybe that's the threshold to be able to get the free the coaching materials and the free help. Maybe there is a paywall to the free help. Welcome to the meeting here at Training Model. I don't have staff anymore, so it's just a meeting with yelling into the void of the camera for people watching the podcast. But as you're probably learning, I have a lot of thoughts and ideas in my head, and it takes a while for me to structure them into something productive. But we're definitely moving in the right direction behind the scenes, and things are ticking along. Obviously, we are now in March, so I'm 2 months into this being my full-time job. I still don't think I'm even functioning at 50% of what I know I'm capable of. I feel quite distracted. I've got all these things I want to be doing. I'm consuming content, trying to improve structures and things around the business side, because I'm now only really in the e-commerce. My social media has been consistent, which is great, and growing. I'm nearly at 10,000, which is fucking mad. One thing I have noticed is that there's just like a steady stream of likes and comments on previous content that I have produced, which is good. That's kind of how I want it to roll. I think that's just how the algorithm works now anyway, especially with the people I don't specifically follow, but Ben Yanez is one that jumps out. Like, I consumed a little bit of Ben Yanez content, and I seem to be getting Ben Yanez content from like 6 months ago just popping up. So there's definitely something, and it's not paid ads, there's definitely something in the algorithm currently that's kind of spitting specific people back in. So I'm sure that's probably happening with other people with my content, because I have been consistent with it. And being consistent is the best place for, or the best way for Instagram to know that, hey, this person is worth sharing, I believe anyway. So things are rolling. I'm 2 months in. To be honest, I had a bigger 2 months than I thought I was going to have, like significantly bigger, which has been awesome. Nearly have for the capacity that I want, I nearly have a full client list, which is great. The movement mentorship intake was really strong and successful, which is awesome. And that's rolling. And that's something I want to chat about today, which is week 2, which is the hip week. Hip function is the tagline for it, but it's really just hip and pelvis motion more than anything else. That's going really well. The group's really active, which is awesome. Plenty of good questions coming through, especially on the group calls, which I love. I love the little sidetracks. I love getting caught in the weeds. I think that's the valuable stuff with actual mentorships, where coursework, you just follow along and follow the breadcrumbs of information, and it's built in a very logical, progressive manner. Whereas with mentorships and live things, you can get in the weeds. And I fucking love getting in the weeds. That's the stuff that actually helps people understand these things. It's the slightly different use case of something like a relative motion or an orientational motion. It's just a much better way to learn, I believe. And I love getting stuck into the weeds. So that's rolling really well, which is awesome. I've got a good list of one-on-one mentoring coaches at the moment as well, which has been really, really good. I've got two internationals currently that have been awesome, that really been hammering some really detailed conversations and growing a lot off the first batch of mentorship calls, the one-on-one mentorship calls. So that's been awesome too. And It's definitely something I want to push more of. I must admit, I much prefer the one-on-one mentoring than one-on-one coaching, online coaching. So I think just as the year progresses, I will not phase out online coaching. Like I still want to offer that to specific people, but I think I'm just going to be a lot more selective with the people I take on. I think it's just for my own energy levels. I think that's just what I need to do. Like I love the one-on-one mentoring calls, even though they're a full hour of my time when they're on compared to online coaching. It just fills my cup, even though my days are a little bit busier when I've got back-to-back ones. Like I just feel like I get more done in those days, where the online coaching side of things, granted, I've got a fantastic list right now, but it's just a different energy for me. And that's something I've learned over the last few years is my energy matters. My energy matters a lot. In fact, it matters more than almost anything else. I've over the last 3 years, I pushed my energy down. Not like my energy was low. My energy definitely was low, but even though the way I always thought about it and the way I described it to the psychologist was like I just felt like I was always moving through mud. I always felt like everything was difficult. Everything was a struggle. Just to move forward and do the next task was always difficult. I had to overcome it. I had to use way more like willpower to get myself just to do day-to-day things. And for 3 years, I really just battled through it. And you're not a real man. Work's meant to be tough, but I don't need to do that. I'm at a point in my career where I can actually be a bit more selective with the things I want to do and the things that I enjoy doing. And I think for me, the two glaring positive North Stars for me are one-on-one mentoring with a small group and these courses, these groups, these big intakes. Obviously got a fantastic opportunity with the One Playground team, which is mad. That's kicking off, and I hope I do really well this year and it extends into something a little bit more long-term. But we'll see. We'll see what the feedback's like. And then obviously with my courses as well. Like this intake has been really fucking fun. Like I'm really enjoying the intake. So I think as I strengthen the supporting structures around that and build some better automations in, I'm heavily considering moving in the AI direction for like administrative tasks. I just know that I need to learn how to do that. Maybe I'll throw it out there again. I actually got some fantastic help related to Discord. I had 2 people reach out. One of my online clients, Scott, who is awesome, great guy. Love coaching Scott. He's been, he's an ex-bodybuilder. He's no longer, I know he listens too, so shouts out Scott. But he's an ex-bodybuilder that has found his way into some of these movement ideas and learning around these movement ideas. And as he's no longer is competing and his just life is transitioning away from bodybuilding, he's fucking jacked. Holy shit. Big muscle bellies. We love it. Shredded. But he wants to just feel better, move better. We're doing some deep tier plyo stuff with him that I've been playing around with my own training. And exploring some deeper ranges, exploring some better reaching strategies, some better loading strategies of his hip. We're helping his hip hinge, which is something I'm going to be chatting about today. But he helped me, or he let me know that he could definitely help me with the Discord stuff. So I'm going to help out. He's going to help me for sure around that and setting that up. And I think most of the things I want to set up with Discord is definitely going to be pretty straightforward anyway. But the other part to that was somebody reached out in my DMs about OBS and helping me with OBS. The OBS stuff I had used in the past, so it was more that I just wanted a couple of small. I've only ever streamed on it. I just tried a trial stream on YouTube. That's another thing I want to do. Try like live streams on YouTube. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I just know. I like watching streamers. I don't know. Like I don't like log into Twitch and fucking watch streamers, but everyone who like frame mogging and all that sort of stuff. Like I just enjoy it. I think it's funny content. I think it's mad. Like, so I'm like, I wouldn't mind trying that. So that would be another thing that I wouldn't mind playing around with. And maybe that's how the feedback stuff plays out. I don't know. Yeah. But, so I've used OBS for streaming in the past. And we used to do that with the comps here at Strength Culture. So I knew how to do the streaming side. I just didn't know how to do the recording side, which I'm doing right now. And hopefully it's working well. But we won't know. If you don't hear any of this, I'll delete the episode and probably skip this week. But if you are hearing this, it is working well, which is good. I digress. There's a lot going on. It's been a really productive first 2 months, but I still see so many holes in what I'm doing and where I want to be moving. And I'm excited to move in those directions. I'm excited to build that up. I really do believe that I have the foundational sort of ideas, the foundational model, I guess, that can be really impactful in the industry. And I know the impact that I've had on coaches in person through strength culture over the years, but obviously I haven't gone full slog into this online world, so it's a whole new thing. But I know the impact I can have, and I'm looking forward to continuing to move in that direction. That's just, I guess we're doing the life update at the start of today's podcast. I'll check the retention data on YouTube and see if that was better than last week, where I go heavy into the technical chat. But I do want to say one thing. Sydney Workshop. I made a post last night saying that the early bird was closing today. I went back and looked at the numbers. We have 9 tickets, not 10. So there's still one early bird left. So first link down below is the Sydney Workshop, March 28th. That is up in Sydney, City Strength. So if you're keen to come to that, there's one early bird ticket remaining before the price goes up. That was the only other thing I wanted to chat about before we get into some technical chat. So week 2 of the mentorship is hip function. So I chatted last week about how the first 2 weeks are kind of just like central ideas that people understand, but just a new way to look at it, new way to explore it. Obviously, we're always applying the principles that underpin all movement models. So just as a recap, the main principles that if you don't understand these things, I think you're doing yourself a little bit of a disservice as a coach. The first one is center of mass and base of support. All of these principles can be as detailed and as convoluted and as complex as you want them to be. But if you can just simply understand that center of mass is what is actually moving the skeleton more so than the musculature in day-to-day and just general living. Obviously in the gym with hypertrophy and tension and all of that sort of stuff, we are using the specific muscles to move bones, but human function is actually center of mass management. That is what is actually moving the system around. If you can just understand that, forward and backwards shifting of center of mass, lateralization of center of mass, and it's all relative to base of support, that's like 60-70% of the overall model, is just understanding that center of mass is a huge thing to understand, where it is, how it moves, and how we control it, and then how different muscular strategies, tension strategies form around the management of gravity. That's the first principle. Second principle is relative versus orientational movement. So relative motion is just the bones of a specific joint moving against each other. It's motion expressed at an independent joint. Whereas orientational motion is simply just movement has been sort of zoomed out. It's been explored throughout a systemic change in position. So this would be like your rib cage changing position in space to achieve the task of getting the hand or the arm into a position, arching your back to get your arms up overhead. That's an orientational movement. The movement hasn't been expressed relative through scapthoracic and glenohumeral joint. The system has oriented itself into a position to achieve the task of getting the arms up overhead, which means we've just bypassed all the tension of scapthoracic muscles, protraction, upward rotation, glenohumeral things, rotations of the shoulder. One is not better than the other. Relative motion is not better than orientational motion. For certain outcomes, it definitely is. But in the same sense, for other outcomes, orientational strategies are actually more productive and more impactful for performance. So it's not that one is better than the other. More often than not, we are trying to coach in the direction of relative motion because that is what actually allows us to lengthen soft tissues, lengthen muscles. And if we can lengthen muscles under load, we start to shift tension and manage tension as the outcome. And that's when you get to length tension relationship and the reactive muscular system, the reactive muscular tension strategy of the system. But all of that lives within relative and orientational movement. The next principle is proximal and distal drivers. So movement can be expressed from the inside out, but movement can also be expressed from the outside in. So a proximal strategy would be like a butt wink orientation to achieve a deeper squat pattern. That is like your proximal structures are reorienting to allow us to achieve the task. That is an example of inside to out. expression of movement proximal to distal. But then you also have distal through to proximal. So I call them distal drivers. This would be changes in foot pressure, changes in loading of different areas of your feet, changing hand pressures or supinations and pronations of the hand, and distal IRs, distal ERs, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, all of that distal stuff. Even your head can be a distal driver. All of these also impact the system. It's happening in both directions all at once. There's proximal force and movement happening and exposing positions, but there's also distal feeders that come into the system as well. So you need to understand that as a principle, is that movement can be expressed from inside out and outside in, proximal to distal or distal to proximal. One is not better than the other. We have to understand both of them. That's why it's a principle, because it applies to everything all at once. It is always there. You can't get away from it. The shitty jargon narrative of like proximal stiffness and distal mobility and all of that, that is the example of proximal to distal. It's a shitty narrative around it, but that is one example of it. But it misses the other side of the coin, where we could feed distal information into the system and we might have a huge proximal change of the axial skeleton or the position of mass or whatever it is we need to do. So it's not that one's better than the other. It's just we need to understand what both of them are and how to manage both of them so we can actually cue and coach more effectively. Drink break. We're back. The next principle that needs to be understood is pressure management. Pressure. What is pressure? More often than not, when I discuss pressure, it's internal pressure, which is diaphragm, it's thoracic pressure, abdominal pressure, pelvic pressure, the position that magnifies and creates pressure changes within the trunk, within the axial skeleton, within the cavity, and modifying pressure in different areas to improve performance and movement expression. A lot of this then ties back to relative motion, specifically of the rib cage, which we'll probably chat about next week, because next week is week 3 of the mentorship where we explore the rib cage and breathing a little bit more. That is another principle. I think that is all the principles off the top of my head as I just sit here, but let's actually, let's use OBS for what it's here for. Let's see if this actually works. That is not the one I want. Have I touched on all the principles, just rattling them off on my head here? Muscle tension, center of mass base support, proximal to distal, relative versus orientational, and then pressure management. That is it. The final one would be the reactive nature of the nervous system as a principle. In the world of coaching, what we're actually discussing there is the reactivity of muscular tension. If we think about this, let's use some slides. While we're here, let's just do a little fucking deep dive into this. If we view the nervous system for what it is, the nervous system is a reactive system. Information comes in from a plethora, love that word, plethora of receptors. We have mechanoreceptors that are picking up things like tension, joint position, forces and pressures and all of that sort of stuff. We have chemoreceptors, which are picking up chemical changes in things like the blood or the peripheral like muscles and all of those sort of things. We have light receptors in the eyes, auditory receptors. We have, there's almost an endless number of receptors around the body that are all taking in information and managing this sensory experience that we're sort of moving through life with. And all of those receptors, majority of them are actually subconscious. We're not actively thinking about them because there's so much information coming into our system that so many of our evolutionary processes have developed to be subconscious for a reason. It is happening under the hood. We are not aware of it. Some people are more in tune to certain things than others. But the easiest one that you can think about is loading a muscle and feeling that tension that comes when you load a muscle. What is actually happening there is load goes through the muscle and then tension is produced as a response to the task. So the task might be to lift the dumbbell, and as load goes through the arm, tension and pressure starts to build and change around the soft tissues and around the joint spaces. That information gets sent to the brain, and then a response starts to come back where we actually start to create movement and create motion and create further tension and downregulate antagonistic muscular tension and upregulate synergistic muscular tension. And we do all of these things. But the most important thing there is that the muscular tension is the output of the system. It is not something that that overrides all of these processes and creates movement. What actually happens when we think about muscular tension is that we have a task, we have a strategy, we have something. There's a cue, there's a goal, there's something that is input in front of the person. The coach says it's on the program, whatever it is. There's a goal in front of them. There's a task in front of them. That task, as they start to move, is what the system is responding to. A lot of this is mass management. A lot of this is center of mass management. And that is what that task and that processing of the movement expression is what changes the tension response over time. The tension is the muscular tension strategy is an output of the nervous system. It is not an input that we are coaching. So if we want to change the reactive nature of the muscular system, if we want to change tension, if we want to change technique, if we want to change expression, it doesn't matter what it is. We have to view the tension strategy as a reactive process, which means to change it, we have to modify the inputs. We have to change the task. We have to change where load is. We have to change the cueing. We have to change all of the skeletal positions in space, because if we can do that, the tension response has to adapt and change and modify to move forward with. I wasn't planning of talking about this today, but there is a free tension. I'll go back to my cam only. Look at us using OBS. There is a free tension couple of modules from the pre-learning for the movement mentorship that I've got. I'll make sure it's linked down below if you want to listen to this stuff that's more productively laid out than me just not planning to talk about this today. But that is the final principle, is the reactive nature of the nervous system. It is specifically the muscular tension is a response. It's an output of the systemic inputs. That is the final principle. If you can understand those things, they are as deep as you want them to be. We could have a 2-3 hour conversation of each of them and probably not only scratch the surface, but they are as deep as you want them to be. If there's something within that you want me to explore more, rip me in the comments, hit me in the comments. I'm looking for algorithm boosters here at the Training Model Studio. If you can drop some comments, some feedback, some topics down below on the YouTube channel. I'm going to just treat this podcast as a YouTube podcast from now on, I think, which means visuals will be around and we'll move in that direction, especially with the OBS stuff. That was my first play with that. But yeah, if you got feedback or you want me to unpack some of this stuff a little bit more specifically, let me know so I don't just come in here raw and try to raw dog my way through it. But yeah, they're the principles that we're applying this week in the mentorship to the hip. And the example that I want to use for this is going to be the RDL. So what is the RDL? What is a hinge? Let's just call it a hinge to start with. And what are we trying to express at the skeletal shape change as we go through an RDL? So obviously, the first way you could think about this is squatting patterns are going to just be vertical displacement of mass. It's just going to be up and down. You could think about if you're around 2020, the elevator squat, the squatty squat movement came in. I think it was the Compound Boys, maybe it was Pat Davidson. Someone over there in the US was pushing this idea of squatty squats, aggressive heel elevation, anterior loads, stacking crown of the head above the diaphragm, above the pelvis, and basically just a pure vertical translation. Squatty squats were in vogue back then. But if you think about squat pattern, basically it is vertical translation of mass more than anything. Hinging patterns is going to be more of our horizontal translation of mass. Ultimately, though, the process to achieve movement of mass and mass management is going to be the same thing. We have to eccentrically load towards the bottom end of the movement, and then we have to concentrically push out of that position. It doesn't matter if you're moving up and down. It doesn't matter if you're moving forward and back. That baseline strategy has to be there. So if we think about more specifically the hinge, what we're actually trying to do is we are trying to expand the backside of the pelvis. We are trying to open up your butt. That is what we're trying to do with a hinge. So a lot of the times, the strategies around that will be in favor of accessing and expressing internal rotation of the hip to achieve that. Because if you internally rotate the hip, so if I close the space at the front of the hip, again, audio listeners, you're missing out on the visual experience here, but if you close the front side of the hip with an IR, you've actually opened the back side of the hip. That's what we've done. And if we think about moving into this position for a hinge, that's what we want to achieve. We want to achieve opening of the butt, opening of the backside of the hip, opening up of the glute. Some people will call it opening up of the pelvic floor, the posterior pelvic floor. Some people will say that we're trying to nutate the pelvis to access that position, depending on who you're learning from or who you're getting confused by in the industry. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you could narratize it. But if you think about it as simply, if we're trying to open up the back side of the hip, it means that we need to close down the front side of the hip. That is the simplest way to think about it. So if we're trying to open up the back side of the hip, a lot of our internal rotation drivers are going to be very, very productive for us, which means our foot pressure, our distal drive of the from the feet up is going to want to be a little bit more towards midline. So we're going to be more on our midfoot, so more forward of mass of our foot. We want probably more medial contacts, so big toe metatarsal, technical term. Big toe knuckle is what I like to call it. Some people say medial heel to pick up some of that internal rotation drive, but I like to think just get on the midfoot and keep your big toe down. That is, for me, enough. Some people take it further. If you've come from like a David Gray lens, you might even end up with like a floating heel strategy for this. Ultimately, the floating heel, though, just brings us further forward of the foot, further towards that internal rotation drive. It means we can't get to the heel. It means we can't ER distally. So if we stay only on the front of the foot, if we stay only towards the big toe and we hammer that foot pressure and push down in that position, that's sending a distal IR up the chain, which helps us close the front of the hip and open the back of the hip, which is what we're trying to express. Some people for hip hinges will put things, if you've learned from like a Zach Couples and maybe a Connor Harris, some people will use like a medial drive of like a foam roller against a wall. That is a distal drive IR up the chain. It's the same thing as improving foot pressure. You've just now got a constraint, something to visually feel, more sensory information that you're conscious about, that you can feel and sense and push into. It is all looking for the same thing though, which is a hip internal rotation, a closing of the front of the hip so we open the back of the hip. You can cue it and coach it and use as many constraints as you want, but the crux of it is if we set the distal stuff up in the way that we want, we're going to get a better expression at the proximal end. So our hinge patterns, we are looking for this IR, distal IR. It doesn't mean that your knees are on towards midline. It's just that we're trying to get away from lateral foot pressure. We're trying to get away from heel pressure more often than not. There's a time where we might get to a heel pressure with a hinge, but in fact, the more I think about that, the less that is. I have a slide in the mentorship that discusses RDLs specifically, and I use a Mike Israetel, a big, heavy heel, huge systemic arch strategy. It's a huge orientational strategy. But ultimately, like if we get so far in the heels, we're basically just like counterbalancing our weight against the barbell. If you can think about it in that way, this would be center of mass management around the base of support. You've made your base of support tiny. You've got the front of your foot off the ground. You're basically just like balancing on your heels. You're using your body weight to leverage the barbell up. And that's how we're actually using that strategy. It wouldn't be that productive for either outcome of strength or hypertrophy in my world. We want better engagement with the ground. We want those medial foot pressures. We want that internal rotation drive. We're probably not trying to bias ER strategy, which is going to be heel, which is going to be lateral heel. So if you've ever watched some of the Mike Israetel sort of movement strategy, that would be one thing to look out for. That's something that I would probably coach out of him if I was coaching him. Not that he's ever going to ask me to coach him, but that would be something that I would be trying to change and improve. Anyway, for the hinge, we're trying to close the front side of the hip with this horizontal translation of the pelvis. So we can feed some distal IR up into the chain. The other thing that we can play around with, though, is pelvic position. So this would be proximal drive of opening up the back of the hip. So if I tuck the pelvis aggressively, tucking the pelvis is actually closing the backside. It's a hip extension. It's a hip external rotation. It closes the backside of the hip when I tuck the pelvis underneath. So more often than not, if we really want to challenge the opening of the backside of the hip, we might actually want to feed a little bit of an anterior tilt into the system. That small amount of hip flexion that can be driven via the pelvis will help lengthen this backside musculature and open up this space a little bit more. So this again, when we've got this more mid-foot, forward foot, medial foot pressure, we might actually be trying to promote a small amount of extension through the trunk. I'm not asking you to arch the fuck out of your back. I'm not asking you to lift your head aggressively. I'm not asking you to really drive your shoulder blades back and down and access this forward shifted mass position. What I'm asking you for is don't be afraid to arch your back a little bit. Don't be afraid to anteriorly tilt your pelvis a little bit if you really want to open this space. The good thing with that, if we get a really deep hip flexion, if we get a really good, strong distal IR into the system, we are going to stretch the fuck out of the glutes. The glutes are extenders and ERs. So if you move the skeleton towards flexion, hip flexion, driven by anterior tilt, and hip internal rotation with those distal feeders, we're going to get a huge glute stretch. You can maximize that even further with a B stance option where you slightly turn your pelvis towards that loaded side. So if I slightly turn my pelvis across midline, it's not aggressive. We're just slightly orienting the system and using a proximal orientational shift to our advantage here. If we orient our trunk and our pelvis towards that loaded side and close that IR space even more, you will pick up even more of a glute stretch here. You will change where the tension around the glutes is felt, but you can modify glute tension very, very easily by just understanding skeletal position. And this is why I always harp on the idea that bone first, learn movement bone first, and then you don't actually need to learn the specific muscles. Is it this muscle or that muscle? It's just that I'm opening space in this area and then I'm closing space in this area. It's by my bias, a significantly better way to learn this stuff. But also, I think it is from feedback for people coming through the courses and the mentorships, both in person and online. Once you learn it bone first, it's like a penny drops and it's like, why the fuck are we taught this in reverse? Why are we taught everything from a muscle contracts, a muscle shortens to contract, but also eccentrically lengthens to contract? This contraction idea that the muscle's only sole purpose is to contract is what most people get hung up on. And that's where all the shitty narratives stem from. If you learn movement bone first, mass first, all of these ideas, all of these shitty narratives just really just fall apart. And you end up sitting there being like, how the fuck do people still think that one muscle is tug of warring a joint position out of a joint out of position? Like that to me, like that's the stability, the isolated joint stability conversation. It just makes no sense once you learn it from the other side. Once you learn that all of this, everything I've just discussed is happening on the back side of the hip. There is nothing going on with hip flexors in this conversation. There is nothing going on with anything that creates internal rotation. There is nothing going on. The whole thing is the eccentric, the yielding strategy is all backside of the hip. What do I need to do to lengthen and open up the backside of the hip? There is actually zero conversation of the opposing musculature in any situation. It is always just one side of the joint that is controlling the yield, controlling the eccentric, and then conversely, once it's loaded, controlling the concentric, controlling the overcoming or producing the overcoming. Probably a better way to think about it. An example of this in like a dumbed down version is like a leg extension. Every single person knows that a leg extension is controlled eccentrically via the quads and concentrically via the quads. There is never a conversation around what is the antagonistic muscle doing with something as simple as a leg extension. There's never a conversation around hamstrings tension, hamstrings fighting for position, hamstrings producing additional force to control position, to control tibial relative tibial position. There is never. There might be a flicker of and we can get into, if you want to dive into some of these deeper ideas around joint stability and antagonistic co-activation and some of those ideas, we can. But at such a base level movement strategy, the leg extension is both controlled eccentrically and concentrically via the quads. That goes with every other joint in every other situation. When we are trying to produce the down position of a pec, or the down position of a bench press, and we're stretching the pec, there is actually nothing going on the backside of the joint. We are not trying to do anything specific with a rear delt, anything specific with rotator cuff, anything specific with any of that. All we're trying to do is add as much load and as much tension to the pec. The only conversation needs to be around the pec. And if we do it well in the yielding phase, if we load the pec well, we will get a huge concentric shortening mid-range tension as we go to produce force with the pec. The only conversation needs to be on the pec. We don't have to have all of this, well, the rotator cuff's unstable and fucking you've got a weakness in your rear delt and it's not holding. That's just the wrong way to think about movement. We're just thinking about what do I need to do with the bones to stretch the fuck out of the pec? How do I get this pec to feel this tension, this lengthened tension, and express this under load? And if you can pick that up, and the way I teach this in the mentorships is muscle charting. Pick a muscle. Think about the position of the skeleton, the localized joints that get it the longest, and the localized joint positions that get it the shortest. But then zoom out and think about the systemic positional changes that will make things longer and shorter. An example of the pec is I can abduct my arm, ER my arm, extend my arm in some way and find a pretty decent pec stretch here. But if I orient my chest away from that arm, I maximize that stretch tenfold. It completely changes the tension that I have. You could also go then further and think about expanding the chest wall, pump handle up, will get even more of a pec stretch if you wanted to go a layer deeper. This is where some of these anterior and posterior compression expansion ideas can come into these things, these conversations. But if you just think about the muscle you're trying to train, the muscular lens, the bodybuilding hypertrophy, finding tension on a muscle, what do I need to do to make it as long as possible at the localized joint? And then what do I need to do as much as possible at the systemic representation of my skeleton? Find those positions under load, and I can guarantee you'll have a better experience training. Find it with lengthened and then learn to find it with the shortened. Do we want to bias more lengthened strategies because we're a hypertrophy and we're on the nuts of the evidence-based era and fucking everyone's just gargling on stretch tension all the time? Great. These are the skeleton positions that are going to support that. Let's just load them up in the most productive way possible. If you're more in the mid-range, this is definitely where I swim. I like mid-range tension. I like active tension. I like big squeeze-based training. I think it's a better way. My joints feel better when I'm doing that, when I'm not stretching the fuck out of everything all the time. I think most people probably would benefit from just training more in the mid-range than in the lengthened range. But what do I need to do to find more active, shortened tension on a muscle? If I understand the joint position and bone position, there actually is no other conversation around what the supporting muscles are because they're not actually in the equation for how I produce force with this muscle. I set the skeleton up and the muscle is responsive and reactive to that. I don't know how the fuck we got to shoulder and pec with relation to the hip hinge, but if you are still here, drop a algo boosting comment down below. But yeah, we were chatting about hip hinges and some of the proximal and distal stuff. The crux with the hinge, though, you're trying to open up the backside. Some distal IR will help that because internal rotation opens up the backside of the hip. Some proximal shifting forward is probably going to help that as well. A little bit of extension in the system is not a bad thing, especially if we want to catch more hamstring. We might even take that a little further, that extension in the system a little further. I wouldn't be going all the way down to the Mike Israetel end, but if you maintain your medial midfoot contacts of the floor and we learn to move our mass around that foot pressure, around that gravity strategy, we will be cooking with gas. if you're still here, I appreciate you. Hopefully the OBS visual experience was good for you. I want to see this podcast data go to like 95% YouTube. So if you are an audio listener, you're missing out. Get on the YouTube channel. Also, please subscribe. I'm used to having like 10,000 subs over on the Strength Culture YouTube channel, and now I'm at like 392 or something. That is really depressing me. So if you are here and maybe this is the first time or you've seen my content before, please sub. Just for no other reason than to make me feel better around my YouTube channel. But yeah, we're there. If you want to come to the Sydney Workshop, come to the Sydney Workshop. First link down below. If you want that couple of tension modules from the pre-learning stuff for the mentorship, that will be down there somewhere as well. It's a free thing. I just need your email for that. Thank you, James Smith PT. Build the email list. The email list needs to be 20% of your Instagram following. My email list is not there because Instagram has grown so much in the last couple of months, but I need to have 2,000 email subscribers. I don't. I think I've got about 900. So I'm halfway there. So I need to build the email list. That should be where my focus is over the next couple of months. So that tension stuff will be down there as well. And then also the intake 6 of the movement mentorship, which is getting a big upgrade, more programming ideas, plenty of more practical application context and specific videos to discuss the common stuff. All of that is coming. I'm using this intake to build it as we roll through. And then intake 6 is going to be the big launch of that new stuff. That will be there as well. That's down below. The final thing I will say is I just appreciate the people that listen to me. If I was to give myself a score out of 10 for today's podcast, I'll probably give it like a 6 out of 10. Felt a bit scattered there. I got a bit lost with the OBS stuff initially. Visuals were on point though. We got a slide up from some of the nervous. I didn't do the nervous system stuff justice. I think I was talking about reactive nature of tension on a previous YouTube video. Someone commented on it today. Let me have a look. We can go to standard. Look at this now. We are back with the visual representation. Let me go to my channel. Alec Blennis is a fucking G, man. I'm a big fan of Alec Blennis. Big fan. Big fan. Here we go. Lateralization. Muscle is reactive to bone position. Episode 28. If you want a better view of the reactive muscular tension, episode 28 might be better for you because I butchered it in today's one. Yeah, 6 out of 10 on today's podcast. Let me know what the score is for the podcast. That might be a fun game that we can do. I'm going to shut the fuck up. If you want to give me a score out of 10, thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. Give me a score out of 10 down below if you're on YouTube. Algo boost me. And please share somebody, anybody, privately. Just send an episode that like, hey, this guy's on some funky shit that I'm finding interesting. Help me share it. Bye.